Me now from COP27. It is good to see you. Nice to see you always, ma'am. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Look, you talk about attack trade barriers to low carbon transition, but what does that mean in reality?
Well, Richard, first let me say that we feel that trade and trade policies are the missing ingredient in the national action plans that countries are putting forward to help them fight climate change. And that is why we've done this report saying that you must put trade and trade policies you cannot fight climate change without. And what we're talking about when we talk about barriers, you will be surprised to find that there are many countries where tariffs on fossil fuel related goods are lower than those for renewables. So we're saying we need to reverse, you need to look at your trade policies to make sure you're favoring those goods that are environmentally friendly. We see trade as a tool for mitigation and adaptation, and that's why we're saying it has to be taken into account.
Why are you any more optimistic that you could get improvements on trade and agreements, bilateral or multilateral agreements on trade, when they can't get agreements on climate change?
Well, let me put it this way. I think there's a recognition now that we have to put all the forces we have at work to cooperate. Countries need to cooperate to be able to fight climate change. COP27, initially when I arrived, I wasn't that optimistic, but listening to leaders here, there's a real realization that we've got to get to implementation. We have to use all tools available. And the talk that I hear now about putting forward some more climate finance for poor countries, about talking about loss and damage, gives hope that trade also will be taken into account as an instrument with which to fight climate change.
Do you agree with Senator Kerry, former Secretary of State Kerry, and others who say that the answer is in the economics, obviously the trade, and things like, I mean, the trading emissions schemes that there are in the world? They are very complicated, and a quick straw poll in our office showed we all had a vague idea what they are, but none of us could really say with any certainty exactly how they worked, except somebody bought somebody else's carbon credits and somebody got a benefit, and eventually it all seemed to work somehow.
Well, you know, let me say yes, that I believe that carbon pricing, and trading, emissions trading, they are all part of the toolbox you need in order to decarbonize the way we live, to decarbonize production. And so if you pollute somewhere or you have released carbon emissions in the activity you're doing, you can go somewhere else and buy emissions reductions from someone else who is not polluting, so you can trade. And that's what they're talking about. I'm trying to talk in very simple terms so you don't say I'm speaking a lot of jargon. But essentially, you can, if you're doing something that is bad for the environment, perhaps someone else is doing something that is good, and you can trade between you. That's what is being talked about. In addition, I think that putting a price on carbon is also something else we need to talk about. So at the WTO, we're developing a framework for global pricing of carbon emissions, so that you can have a price put on them and then reduce these emissions. If you can't price something, then it's very difficult to get a solution to get people to stop using it. That's the kind of framework I'm trying to talk about in very simple terms.
No, well, I'm grateful, but the problem with carbon pricing is nobody can agree what the price is. And yes, the market, you can have a setup of the market looking at it, but the view is today that it still needs to be, the real price of carbon should be much higher.
But look, Richard, right now in the world, we have 70 fragmented carbon pricing and taxing systems. And it's very difficult for business to go from one jurisdiction to the other and have to face a different price. So working with other institutions like the IMF and the OECD, if we can put together a global framework, which is what we're trying to do, that has one price for those who are low income and low polluters, another higher price for high income and high polluters, and somewhere along that range, you're solving a problem. And those who don't want to price carbon but want to use regulation, we can do an equivalency so that that can also be made into a price. So I think it's a very doable proposition, and it's not that complicated.
You said there were 75 different schemes, or more than 70 different schemes. That's pretty complicated.
70, yes.
70, good Lord. Well, thank you for joining us tonight from Sharm el-Sheikh. We'll talk more about it as this thing progresses. Very grateful for you, Director General, joining us tonight.